Well, I know a lot of you really enjoy one of the features that we have on the Dove Radio and TV is Plugged In Movie Review. And boy, this team really does a great job in bringing us reviews and then telling us whether it's going to be 1 to 5 stars. And some of the ratings at times can be pretty interesting. Well, anyway, we have with us today Paul Asay, and you probably have seen him on Plugged In Movie Review. And he's authored a book called God on the Streets of Gotham. Ah, yes. Hi, Paul. How are you doing, friend?
I'm doing fantastic. How you doing?
Okay. Are you in Colorado? Where are you?
Yes, I am in Colorado. It is very, very warm here. We're just seeing actually some fires are going around all around us, so the air is a little bit hazy around here. But you know, too.
Oh, that's great. Well, listen, hey, thanks for what you guys do. Your feature, Plugged In Movie Review, is really great. I think you got, what, 6 million people now seeing that on a regular basis?
You know, it's amazing how much it's grown actually over the past several years. You know, I know that we have an outreach of about that many, maybe even a little bit higher now on the radio. Our website, where I do most of my work, is trafficked by more than 1 million people every month. So you just, you know, God has really blessed us. I don't think you can say it any more than that.
Well, I know a lot of parents appreciate it because you're helping them make good decisions before they get tied up into a situation they wish they weren't there. And some of the adjectives you use in giving a star at times is kind of fun. I enjoy watching it, and I think you guys do an excellent job. All right, so what provoked you, God on the Streets of Gotham? What are you doing here?
Well, you know, this is sort of an interesting little fit for somebody from Plugged In, because as you know, you're obviously very familiar with what we do. We tend to be fairly cautionary when it comes to certain types of movies. And, you know, the new Batman movies are movies that we would typically be very cautionary about. You know, they're not movies that everybody should go and run out and see. They can be really dark and gritty, and there's some problematic content in there. There's no question about that. But within the realm of that dark, gritty movie, these movies that you see, there can be some really, really poignant, interesting things that speak to our Christian faith. And that's essentially what the book is about. It's sort of taking the most recent Batman movies, looking back to some earlier Batman movies, the comic books, even the television show, the old 1966 television show a little bit, and talking a little bit about some of the spiritual themes that you might be able to find within kind of this archetype that we know as Batman.
All right, it is put out by Tyndale, and I'm sure you can check it out at Evangel or take a look at it at Barnes & Noble or Amazon. Well, you know, one of the things you talk about, I think, is pretty good, is there is I guess, a parallel or some kind of corollary between the mask of Batman and the mask that we wear.
Yeah, I think that's really true. And one of the things that really appealed to me about Batman, I think, is just how much, in a strange sort of way, he's like us. When you look at a lot of superhero stories around, and there have been some really fantastic superhero stories, you know, The Avengers was an exciting movie, had a lot of heroic adventures and all that kind of stuff, and you look at some of the superheroes that we're very familiar with, and they really show these heroic, superpowered, superhuman type of guys doing some pretty amazing things. Batman, he's kind of a self-made guy, and you know, he doesn't have any superpowers. He's a guy a lot like us, except with a few more zeros on his bank account. He just, he really desires to do good things. And so because of that, the thing that really impresses me about Batman is that he resembles us, and he deals with a lot of the same pain and angst and problems that we deal with in our everyday lives.
Do you think that's,
one of those issues? Go ahead.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. Do you think that's one of his big qualities, that he's just an average guy trying to do a good thing?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I really do. And you know, it's hard to look at Batman, you know, with his utility belt and his Batmobile and his abilities and all that kind of stuff, and say, yeah, that's an average guy, because obviously he isn't. He's definitely not doing things that we, you know, just getting out of this chair could do. But at the same time, he is sort of one of us. And I think the thing that appeals to me a great deal about him is that even in spite of his flaws, and he has a lot of flaws, he is trying to follow a calling. He's trying to make the world a better place. And in a way, I think that that's kind of what we as Christians are being called to do. We all have these amazing callings that God is asking us to do, to fulfill his greater, larger purpose. And sometimes it takes courage to follow those callings. Sometimes it takes bravery and some pain on our part to follow those callings. And yet, that's what we're supposed to do. And that's what Batman, I think, does pretty much every night.
So how do we get any, maybe what you'd call spiritual significance out of his wardrobe?
Yeah. Well, you know, and that's sort of one of the funner parts of the book that I actually sort of navigated. I actually take Batman's wardrobe and sort of compare it to, you know, Ephesians 6, where Paul is talking about kind of this spiritual armor that we all put on. And there's some really interesting parallels, I think, when you're talking about that spiritual armor and you're looking at Batman's, you know, Kevlar armor that he puts on and his cowl and his boots and his cape. You know, obviously, I don't think that anyone kind of within the DC world or the movie world really thinks of Batman's armor as spiritual. But at the same time, I think that you can draw some parallels where Batman's equipment can be used as sort of a metaphor for our own armor, our own, you know, spiritual protection that we put on every day and that we should as Christians.
That's interesting. You know, the other thing you point out that I never really thought of, but on the other hand, I think it's one of the qualities of what you're trying to convey here is that even though Batman, for the most part, in all of his heroic superhero actions is independent, he still calls on others. I mean, he still has companionship. He still has relationship. He's not just a sole independent hero.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that that's a really crucial thing to understand because, again, when we look at sort of this modern day Batman, you know, Robin's long since gone. A lot of the things that we remember maybe from the 1960s shows or even from some of the 70s cartoons, they're sort of gone. And the guy who we see in the most modern movies, he is kind of a loner. And yet when you look at him, he still has people who he leans on for support. He still has people that actually help him sort of determine right from wrong. And I think that as Christians, man, the people around us are so important. Mm-hmm. You know, we really need to embrace the people around us and use them for spiritual guidance and to help support us. You know, one of the things that I talk about in the book is Batman, Bruce Wayne's loyal butler, Alfred, is always there for him. He always supports him through thick and thin. But then you look at someone like Commissioner Gordon. He is also always there for him, but he also is part of his conscience. You know, if Batman starts taking a step away from the narrow path that he's chosen, the right path that he's chosen, Commissioner Gordon's there to sort of reel him back in and say, no, you can't take this step. If you do, I'll be the first one coming after you. And I think that there's something to be said about that. You know, the group of people that Batman has sort of gathered around him, they're people who really accept Batman and Bruce Wayne for what he is, and yet they're always pushing him to what he really needs to be for the city of Gotham. And I think that that's kind of inspiring.
How do you think the principle and the point of sacrifice is demonstrated here?
You know, I think that when you look at Batman, one of the things that you see a lot in kind of the world of superheroes is this sort of Christ-like figure making humongous sacrifices for the world. You know, Superman was actually designed as almost sort of a Christ-like avatar, where he is this being who really comes down to save the world. And I think that when you watch some of the movies, they pretty much stated that baldly. Batman is a different sort of guy, and he makes a different sort of sacrifice. And this is going to get kind of, this may just speak to the geek in me, you know, both the Batman geek and the spiritual geek in me. But at least so far within the Batman saga, you don't see him making that Christ-like sacrifice, that innocent lamb sacrifice, because Batman is not innocent. He is not the type of person who you can say he's blameless and therefore he takes on our sins as his own, that kind of metaphor. But what he does become is sort of a scapegoat. And you see in the latest Batman movie, not the one coming up, but Dark Knight, you see him becoming sort of this biblical scapegoat where he takes on the sins as the ancient Jews sent a scapegoat off into the desert, carrying their sins, metaphorically. Batman also takes on the sins of Two-Face, essentially, Arthur Dent, who was this strong leader. You know, he really wanted to do right for Batman, but he became corrupted, did some awful things. Batman thinks that, I'm sorry, Batman thinks that Gotham deserves to have an hero like Arthur Dent. So he takes on the sins and says, blame me for those, I can take it. And then you actually see him just zipping off into the streets of Gotham, much like a scapegoat would just zip off into the desert.
You know, it's interesting that you've been able to make this corollary, and yet most people, when they go to see Batman, I don't think they're expecting to see a Christian maybe metaphor tied to it. So how do we make people aware of that? Because obviously you're pointing out some things I think nobody's ever thought of before.
Yeah, and I'm not sure. You know, it's really an interesting thing, and I don't want to say that I've thought of stuff that no one else has, because I think that this stuff is there if you are willing to look for it. And I think that really pretty much what people, when they go to movies, is just really look for evidences of how God's working throughout those movies. Because, you know, to be honest with you, I think that God, he is so big, and he created us all. And because of that, I think that he filters into everything that we do in a weird sort of way. Even in obviously really problematic type of areas, if you go see them, this is again not saying that you should go see it, but if you do go, I think you can see God's fingerprints in a lot of these things if you're willing to take the time to look.
All right, it's called God on the Streets of Gotham, and Paul Asay, and of course you probably have watched, you know, Plugged In Movie Review. We air it here both on the Dove Radio and TV, put out by Tyndale House, and check it out through Barnes & Noble, Evangel, or even maybe at Amazon, and I think you'll find it to be a pretty interesting read. Well, Paul, this is interesting. The new Batman movie coming out, have you had any excerpts? Do you have any idea what's going on there?
No, I'm really anxious to see it, actually. And part of me is really worried about seeing it because you don't know exactly what they're going to do. I mean, it could destroy all my themes, and they might bring back Adam West as Batman, and then where will I be? Where will my book be? But from what I can see in the trailers, it seems like there's going to be a lot of really interesting spiritual themes at play, even in this one. From what I can see, Batman's going to look more human and yet more heroic than he ever has. So I'm kind of excited to see it. Oh,
that's wonderful. Hey, thanks for being with us. I appreciate it very much. I'm going to give you now time to go put your cape back on and go to your next project. Hey, thanks, my friend.
Really appreciate it.
All right, talk to you soon.